Welcome back to the podcast. I have, at least to this podcast, a first time guest, Jim Beard. Now, Jim, whenever I have a guest on for the first time, I want to know their origin story. So, what got you hooked to the comic books and made you a lifelong fan?
Wait a minute, what if it's a secret origin and my villains could strike at me through my personal life by knowing they'll go back in time and make sure that I didn't become the comics fan?
The time paradoxes.
Right.
You had too many flashes.
Truthfully, it's in my DNA. I'm very blessed to have a dad who is a big nerd himself and was when he was a kid and loved comic books and pulp magazines, the old movies and the serials, the Saturday morning serials and all of that good stuff. Those things were already around the house when I grew up. There's no way I could not have become the fan of comics and movies and pop culture that I have become. And he always encouraged it. He always encouraged my reading and my drawing pictures and all of that stuff and bought me my first comics. So again, it's like I just picked up from my dad's interests.
So, are you more of a Marvel fan or a DC fan?
Okay, at the end of the day, I'm a DC fan and I always will be. My favorite character of all time, fictional character of any medium at all, is Batman. But I have an incredible interest in Marvel Comics. I actually worked for 17 years. I worked for Marvel.com, providing weekly content. So I'm in Marvel. And there were times where I was probably buying more Marvel titles than DC. But again, DC will always have those characters that interest me the most and that I love the most.
So usually when I have a fan come on, I ask them to pick a topic because if they're excited about the topic, it should filter onto fans. And you picked a very unique choice, which is Marvel Team Up 41 through 44, which is also known as the Salem Saga. Why did you pick this particular comic?
Number one, I love it, but there's a few storylines that have stuck with me to this very day, and that happens to be one of them. There's not a ton of the ones that are right up there at the top, but this is one of them. It hit me at an interesting time. It was 1976, so I was 11 years old.
The golden age of comics for a kid.
Right?
Mine is like 77 and 78. And anything that came out with them are Kirby Eisner winning comics, no matter how bad they are.
That's the same with me. I really got into superhero comics in 72. And there's not a lot of people who would say, oh, that's an incredible era for comics, especially DC, but I love all that stuff. I wasn't getting a whole lot of Marvel comics when I was a kid. My dad bought me more DC comics, and that was because those were the characters that he recognized more. And let's face it, Marvel Comics in the late 60s going into the 70s, and especially into the early to mid 70s, they looked different and they felt different. I have very clear memories of standing in the drugstore where I got my first comics. And my dad was somewhere else in the store and looking at that spinner rack and turning it. And there was the DC stuff, but there was the Marvel stuff. And that was the ones that I always kind of looked over my shoulder to make sure that I wouldn't get in trouble. When you have Wonder Woman and Justice League of America, and then you have Son of Satan and
Werewolf by the
and the Defenders with all their weird crap going on, they were more adult. Along comes this storyline, and it was almost an illicit thrill because the moment this storyline opens, it's very dark. It's all about the Salem witchcraft trials and going back in time with Spider-Man of all things, but with the Scarlet Witch, with an incredible cast of guest stars, everything from A-list characters like Doctor Doom to Moondragon. And let's face it, the Scarlet Witch wasn't a huge character at that time.
Unlike today.
Her husband, the Vision, was also one of the headliners during this four-part story. And maybe he was a little bit more cool or whatever, but I wasn't like I love Spider-Man, and this was a cast of guest stars that maybe I wasn't totally up on, and so it was all kind of new and weird. Doctor Doom, I would have known the best, but I didn't really know anything about the Salem witch trials, and basically, as the story gets started, the main villain, before we learn who the main villain is a historical figure, a real historical figure, Cotton Mather. And Bill Mantlo, the writer, God bless his soul.
He is such a tragic figure.
He,
He is so underrated because it was said at one time that he wrote more characters than anybody else than Stan Lee. He did so many iconic things.
yeah,
And in the 1990s, he went off to law school, was rollerblading in New York City, got hit by a car, and he's been basically in hospice, not hospice care. Well, he's got his own home now that Marvel did finally buy him, but he needed care the rest of his
yeah.
life. And his brother, until his brother died, took care of him for years and years. And he's almost not exactly a vegetable, but he could never function.
He lost a lot of cognitive abilities. There was a really great moment when Rocket Raccoon jumped from comics to the screen that I think the whole movie was streamed for him. And
Yes.
you could tell he knew what was going on. If anybody out there is not real familiar with Bill Mantlo, go and look up the list of characters that he created, and I think you're going to be amazed at some fan favorites in there. Rom Space Knight, Bill Mantlo.
Micronauts.
Yeah, Bug, and the ones that were already toys.
He did a long run of the Incredible Hulk that
Yeah,
nobody
Rocket
talks about. Yeah, the Rocket Raccoon was in there, the UFOs. But yeah, he did a huge amount of characters, and he doesn't get the credit he deserves.
No, he really does it. He just had a birthday, and I write for the 13thdimension.com, and I did a tribute to Bill. And I picked another story, Marvel team up, a little later from this one, which is sometimes known as the Wood God trilogy. It's two team ups with the Hulk and then with Warlock, of all things. But in that is Bill's own character, who was new at that time, called Wood God, who it's a kind of a lower tier character, but a really fascinating one. The Salem Saga has something really cool and historical in it for a Marvel team up. The main villain, the Dark Rider, is Bill's first original villain created for Marvel Team Up for his pretty long run in Marvel Team Up. A really fascinating character that comes on the pages in one form and then like changes into his real form. It's such a wild and wonderful and way out and wacky storyline that sometimes if I reread it, it's like, how did he get away with this? It's literally set in the historical time period.
And you would think that Sal Buscema actually had fun drawing this because he's another iconic. He's a younger brother of John. He did 8 years of Spectacular Spider-Man. And let's talk about the inker, Mike Esposito, which is interesting because he mostly did work with Ross Andrew,
Yes.
a lot of that. And because I always think these things are morbidly funny. This was the time when poor Marv Wolfman was editor in chief at Marvel. And for newer fans who don't understand this, Stan Lee left in the early 70s. Roy Thomas came on for about 2 years. And then you had this round robin of people just tapping out as editor in chief. You had Len Wein for a while. Jerry Conway was like for about a month. Marv Wolfman stepped in. And it wasn't until Jim Shooter finally changed a lot of things.
Nobody could follow Stan. People wondered, like, how the heck did he do this? It is a really weird revolving door. Sal, now I consider Ross Andrew my Spider-Man artist because when I really got into Spider-Man, it was right around when he took over from John Romita Sr. So he was my Spider-Man artist, just like Irv Novick is my and Jim Aparo because of Brave and Bold. So in that same vein, Sal Buscema is my other Spider-Man artist because he was doing Marvel Team Up when I pretty much really was getting into Marvel Team Up. Funny story about this 4-part storyline is that as a kid, I only had the first 2 parts, and I had the 2-part coda. It's the story of how Spider-Man has to get home to his own time, but he has to make stops in Killraven's time and then Deathlock's time before he gets back to.
Get is unusual for the series because the series usually had done in one format. And now I think you have a 4, but really a 6-part storyline. You had Scarlet Witch, then the Vision, then Doctor Doom, and Moondragon. I'm like, Moondragon?
If
It
someone,
worked.
how the hell will Moondragon fit into a story set in the Salem Witch Trials? Just read it. You know what I mean? It's like Kirby. Don't ask, just buy.
The one because it really is a good, fun little read. It's very
dark.
and
It's
it's
fun.
at the end of the issue. There's the witches from the Salem Witch Trial hanging from the trees.
Yep.
And they pulled out poor Dr. Doom's time machine. You would think over the years he'd have a LoJack on that or something. All the times that everybody steals that poor thing. I'm like, geez, Doom, don't you ever hear of a LoJack? You're trying to be emperor of the world. And you basically have got this rent a time machine type thing going on.
That time machine has probably caused more problems than Doom himself. And then what's funny is that Spider-Man still has to use it to get to his own time, and he either doesn't know how to use it or it's just not working right, and that's how he ends up with Killraven and Deathlock. I didn't know Killraven all before seeing that, but I knew Deathlock, but I think that was like one of the only times, or like the first time I got a full story with him. And those are both dark, really dark stories too, because number one, Spider-Man is so impacted by the Salem storyline. He's already all of his own problems in his own book, and he's still kind of recovering from the whole Gwen Stacy.
Right, because this is not very long after that.
And then he's hit with the fact that you cannot change time and has to witness what happens at the end of those trials. And then he is put into 2 dystopian futures and has to ask himself, my God, is this what's coming up? Killraven's out a little bit further. Deathlock is the one that's a little closer to his time. But he sits there and he's, oh my God, is everybody I know dead? Is Mary Jane dead? New York is a shambles. And there's this like weird cyborg cop thing walking around and mutant and all that other stuff. I'll say it, only Bill Mantlo could have written all this stuff, and God bless him for writing it. See, storyline that I don't think a lot of people know, and I really wish they did. I did a whole book as a guide to Marvel Team Up called Walking the Wider Web. I hope you'll check it out. And throughout the issue breakdowns, I peppered it with essays on what I consider some of the really big storylines of Marvel Team Up. I knew for a fact I had to have an essay on the Salem Saga, and Dilworth came to my rescue and wrote a really fun essay digging into the storyline.
This is also a time at Marvel when there was no real group or book editors. So, you have to Marv Wolfman as these Marvel team-ups are coming across his desk and going, what? Moondragon? Dr. Cotton Mather? And it was a time when Marvel was kind of like the Wild West because these writers and Bill Mantlo obviously had a lot of fun doing this 4-part story because it's like it was like he put a wheel up, spun the wheel and go, yeah, okay, I guess we're doing Moondragon this time around.
Yeah, we haven't done
Moondragon.
If I remember correctly, I don't think she ever is a headliner in Marvel. She had her shot. I could never be mistaken for a Moondragon fan. In fact, I really hate the character and always have. I don't know, it somehow works.
You had the Scarlet Witch made sense. The Vision made sense. You had Doom. Okay, that's weird and different, but he's there. And then you throw in Moondragon on top of it. Could you have used Doctor Strange or Modred or Brother Voodoo?
Oh, Modred.
But you threw in this Moondragon, who's more of a space character than a mystical character. And it's really fun. And it's unfortunate because team-up books are no longer popular. But nobody does team-up books anymore like this. So we've been deep digging into the Bronze Age, which for a newer fan who's going out to the MCU movies might seem like ancient history. Why should fans go back and read any of these comic books, even from the Bronze Age, the Silver, I like the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age is just as wild, crazy things that, you could never do before. Why should a fan go back and read something decades ago?
I think it's the Bronze Age threads are still there, especially with a character like Batman. As far as I'm concerned, the Batman of today in comics is what started in 1986 with Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller. We're still playing off of that to this day. Everybody thinks it's when Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams took over Batman in 1970, and that's when he became dark. That's not really true. Just pick up Brave and Bold in the 70s, and Batman's walking down the street. Citizens are saying, "Hi, Batman," and stuff like that. It is still playing off of the 60s TV series, but the Bronze Age, I think, is still important because it really set down, again, a lot of those things that we're still playing with today. The team up books were always all about not only let's give a spotlight to a popular character, and I don't mean like the main star, Batman or Superman or at Marvel, Spider-Man and the Thing, but rather the guest star. Let's not have all those big ones, but let's give these other men and women a chance to spotlight. You could never do Spider-Man and Moondragon today. She might guest star for a little bit in his own book, and they could get away with it. But it's so weird because the team up books were the stuff that I loved the most. For me, it was the more superheroes, the better. If I could get 2, 3, 4 more heroes in a book or a huge team like the Justice League or the Avengers, then I was happier. And I love all those interactions, how Spider-Man is going to react and mix with a character like the Vision or Moondragon. Guess what? Bill Mantlo was there to tell you how that was going to work out. And the other cool thing about the Salem Saga is it's not really all team-ups. He has to work alongside Doctor Doom, but it's certainly not a textbook team-up. Scarlet Witch and Vision a little bit more. Moondragon, nobody got along. Moondragon, she didn't get along with anybody. And a really weird villain that, if I remember correctly, doesn't really ever get used again, the Dark Rider. And he's one of those Marvel characters which is like immensely powerful. And as it says in the text, he's almost a god. And the stuff that he wants, he's trying to drain power and energy from everybody. And I don't know if Bill didn't use him much again or nobody else remembered him or thought that it was interesting. But the Bronze Age is still important. And you know what? A lot of the creators today were weaned on the Bronze Age. So the things that they do are being informed by the Bronze Age. A lot of the guys that are working today, that was their golden age.
Yes. 1977, I'll pull up them things and just read them and go, yeah, this is good stuff.
Yes.
Jim, any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say?
There's a lot of gold to be mined in Marvel Team Up. It's got an incredible lineup of creators, some of the greatest artists of all time. Gil Kane in the early days was right there and doing everything. It's got a really fantastic line of characters. If you're a Spider-Man fan, it's required reading as far as I'm concerned. And I really hope that my book illustrates that well. It was a fun time in comics history when team-up books ruled, and I hope someday they try it every once in a while, or maybe someday they'll try it again, and things will change and it'll be popular again.
Jim Beard, comic book historian. Thanks for joining me. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.